just. Lisa, I'm going to start letting people in so you can as well.
Great, thank you. And I hit record to cloud, is that right? Instead of record to computer?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
Morning, everyone. This is Angie Newsome. Thanks so much for joining us today at our 10 for North Carolina event from Carolina Public Press. I'm so excited to see all of you, to have this hour with you as participants in this amazing panel that we have gathered together today. So I just wanted to take a moment to welcome all of you and thanks for joining us. So for those of you who might not know me or are still getting to know Carolina Public Press, I just want to take a moment and tell you a little bit about us. We are celebrating our 10th year this year, hence the 10 for North Carolina events that we're doing. We are a nonprofit, nonpartisan news organization serving all of North Carolina with investigative and public interest, public service news. You can find everything we do at carolinapublicpress.org. It's free and available to you. So I hope you'll make us your first stop for news about North Carolina on the issues that you care about. That includes the environment, education, politics, criminal justice, and more. So I really hope you'll spend some time on our website and send us ideas coming from your communities all across the state. We really appreciate this opportunity to be with you. So like I said, we're celebrating our 10th anniversary. So we've been having, we're holding 10 of these kinds of conversations in the community of topics and issues that are of interest to North Carolinians. So we of course have this one about rural communities and rural change makers. We've held events about news deserts in North Carolina, about the Violence Against Women Act, all sorts of stuff. So if you want to see what else we've done, we have recordings available to you that you can go back and listen to or watch if you'd like. And we have ones coming up and I'll share those with you at the end of our time today. So in the interest of time and because an hour goes so fast, we really hope that you'll utilize the chat function with us, which is at the bottom of your screen. There's a little bubble that says chat. So if you have questions or discussion points you want to bring up, please drop them there. Our past sessions have been super active, the channels or the chat has been. And we have people on our team that are monitoring that and are going to get your questions to me and I'll get them to our panelists today. So with that, I also want to just note that this session is in partnership with the Rural Center. We really appreciate their leadership and helping us put this event together. So I really want to honor them and thank them. And it's also been sponsored by Asheville Buncombe Technical Community College. We are a nonprofit, so sponsorships and donations and foundation support make us happen. So we really appreciate the support of AB Tech in supporting this event. So thanks so much to AB Tech. So with that, I want to introduce our panelists today. Brianna Goodwin is joining us. She's the Executive Director at Robeson County Church and Community Center. She lives in Lumberton and has worked with the center as Assistant Director of Operations for more than 2 years. She has ties to organizations like the Kiwanis of Robeson, Lumberton, Robeson County Arts Council, Robeson Family Counseling Center, and more. And the center was founded to address the social issues in the county. And throughout the years, the center has addressed issues like voter disenfranchisement, to hunger, to education, just to name a few. And I know she'll tell us more about her organization. So Brianna, could you say hello to everyone?
Hello, everyone, and welcome.
Yeah, thanks so much, Brianna. Next, we have Misty Herget, Vice President of Programs and Strategic Partnerships at the Rural Center. She's been at the center for 14 years, and she worked in small business and entrepreneurship support, community engagement, and leadership development. Currently, she oversees the center's leadership and engagement programs, development work, and builds key partnerships to support the center's programmatic and center-wide initiatives. Misty, would you say hello to everyone?
Good afternoon, everyone. Happy to be here.
Yeah, thanks so much for joining us, Misty. Next, we have Ray Jeffers. He's Policy and Program Manager for Rural Advancement Foundation International. He was born and raised in Person County, where he also operates the family Century Farm purchased by his great-grandfather in 1919. I want to hear about this. Previously, Ray served for 12 years as an elected Person County Commissioner. He was president of the North Carolina Association of County Commissioners in 2014 and was an executive board member of the National Association of Counties. He continues to serve on several local and state boards promoting agricultural and rural communities. Ray, thanks so much for joining us.
Hello, everyone. Thank you all for having me.
And next we have LB Prevette, Senior Training Manager with Mitchell Gold, Bob Williams. LB serves as the Director of Community Engagement at Forward Wilkes, an organization that works to create safe and inclusive spaces and events for minority and LGBTQ plus youth in Appalachia. In her professional life, she works as the Senior Training Manager at Mitchell Gold, Bob Williams, which is a furniture manufacturer that's been based in rural Taylorsville in the heart of Furniture Row since 1989. LB, would you say hello to everyone too?
Hi all, thanks so much for having me here and coming out today.
Great, thanks everybody. I'm excited to get started. So with that, Misty, I'd love to start with you. You know, we talk about rural North Carolina at Carolina Public Press quite a bit. I'm from rural North Carolina. I'm from Davie County originally. And we know based on what the Rural Center's statistics and numbers have said that 80 of the state's 100 counties are considered rural, and there's about 4 million residents, rural residents in North Carolina, from what I understand. Can you tell us about that? You know, what defines rural? Because I know that some people go to state, local, federal agencies and get different information about what is rural and what is rural North Carolina. So set the stage for us, if you would.
Sure, Angie, I'm happy to. So actually, with the recent census data that has just been released, we are 78 counties in North Carolina.
Oh, 78, okay.
That are now regional suburban counties, Onslow and Johnston. So that is very recent, and we're just kind of pulling that data and the maps together for that to soon be released. But the Rural Center, let me just quickly, for those of you on here that may not be familiar with our organization, we are a nonprofit, statewide nonprofit. We have been around for almost 35 years, going into our 35th year in 2022. And we serve, well, now the state's 78 rural counties. We have an economic development focus, And our primary areas that we focus on and work in are small business support and lending, research and advocacy, and leadership and engagement. And so we have a lot going on here. We approximately have 40 staff here at the organization, and many of us are working in different ways to serve rural North Carolinians. And unfortunately, for the past year and a half, we have been doing that virtually and hope to soon be able to be back in our communities. But back to your question about rural. So the way the Rural Center defines rural is fewer than 250 residents per square mile. Mm-hmm. So we have a pretty liberal definition of it. And like you said, if you look at some other sources, particularly the federal government, theirs is a lot more conservative. So they would consider North Carolina having a lot fewer rural counties than what we do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so, yeah. Oh, sorry, Misty, go right ahead.
Well, and I just wanted to point out though, particularly with the new census data that has come out, and the population in rural is certainly, at one time that was the majority in the state, and with the last census that shifted to the majority of our population being located in urban and metropolitan centers. But I do want to point out that rural North Carolina has the second largest rural population in the country, second to Texas. Yeah. Have the second most small towns with fewer than 10,000 in population, second to Pennsylvania. So I do want to reiterate, we still are a very rural state, and those places are very critical to our state's well-being.
Yeah, so that's a good segue into Ray and the work that you do with RAFI, but also, the leadership roles you've had across the state with the county commissioners, and even with your own farm. Can you kind of talk about the conversations around rural issues and how that's changed throughout your experience and in your work?
Thank you. I will say probably 12 years ago when I first became elected and started attending meetings and going to things across the state, the urban-rural divide was very real. And I guess it still is today, but I think we've learned to somewhat work together a little bit more to understand that some things happen better if we work together as a region, more so than Person County versus this county or that county versus that county. And but even at my national level stuff, I was chair of our Rural Action Caucus for the National Association of Counties. 2/3 of your nation counties are rural. 3,069 counties. So it's still very important to make sure that we put rural issues to the forefront and try to work with our urban partners, because oftentimes a lot of those services and things that we need in our rural communities, they have, and we need to kind of partner to be able to, serve our rural citizens the best we can.
Yeah, and so that's a great question for Brianna in Robeson County. How can you work with so many different organizations or have connections with different organizations. So what are some of the issues in your county that you think are, because you're a rural county perhaps, and then how do you work across organizations and collecting and coordinating those services to help answer those issues?
Absolutely. So Robeson County and the region around us, such as Cumberland and Scotland counties, are unique because not only do we have all of the challenges of rural communities, we've also had the 2 hurricanes in recent years. And so the natural disasters have just exacerbated our pre-existing rural conditions. And so with that, questions like, the question of housing and food accessibility over. So as far as the center is University being open and available to Robeson County residents. Grants, churches, and individuals. So because of that, we have the freedom to mold and shift as we need to address the current needs of our population. And so right now we have a very heavy focus on addressing hunger and food scarcity around the county. Throughout COVID, we've actually delivered food, not just from our facility here in Lumberton, but we've gone out to the smaller communities. So that's a big need that I always advocate for, because if you don't address the basic needs, food, hygiene, the very basic needs, people are not able to even consider the larger issues such as the financial and economic issues in an area. So what we're really fighting to address right now are those basic everyday needs so that people can then start to focus on education and the more preventative areas.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what about in Wilkes County, LB, and the organizations that you were a part of, have been a part of, are a part of now? What are some of the needs that y'all are addressing or seeing among the folks that you serve?
Yeah, Wilkes County is one of those unique places where, not only are we divided by like townships and the normal rural distance, we actually have 2 physical townships less than a mile apart from each other that have their own actual, police systems, fire systems, local governments. So we tend to have this redundancy of services and needs, both from like a local government and just the density of churches, through the area, where you got a lot of folks that are kind of doing the same niche needs. What I've loved about Wilkes County is the way our health foundation has really grown, taking an abandoned complex into this large foundation that serves our neighbors most in need that may not have access to dental and health care, as well as incorporating that with, biking, our wonderful trail system, and fresh foods. And then the way our Wilkes Recovery Revolution, that's a wonderful recovery community organization. So it's actually led by folks that have the lived experience of coming through recovery. And the way they take not just like the actual act of recovery and nourishing, the actual physical needs of the body through that, but they're creating a community garden so that folks are able to go practice therapeutic gardening through this process. And give this cycle of community service back to their community as well.
Yeah, that's so great. I mean, there were a lot of questions that were submitted from all of y'all, the participants who are joining us. They're just really amazing, and I hope we can delve into as many of these as we want. I think I'd like to start kind of broadly, based on what you all said, and talking about, what inspired you to kind of take action in your own community, and then how you show that leadership, how to become a leader in rural communities. And then we could talk in some specific ways. I mean, there's some real specific questions about supporting addicted people in rural North Carolina, food shortages and hunger, which some of y'all mentioned, farming, supporting farmers, the role of local media and broadband, and the economy. So those are a lot of great, very specific questions. But if we kind of step back a little bit, what is it about you or what inspired you to get involved in your own community? LB, let's start with you. I'm curious.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I don't think of myself as a rural leader per se. I have never had any form of like an actual leadership title, of like real work with a nonprofit or local government. But I do think of myself as a community servant. And I think when you're looking for folks that tend to like step into the role of leader, what you're really looking for is those who are there to serve. And for me, I left home and moved out to West, was studying at the University of Nevada. And it really was thinking about myself growing up in Wilkes County, a queer high school kid in rural Appalachia. And I wanted to go serve that kid. Like I wanted to go back home and try to be the adult that 17-year-old me wished they had. And try to create a culture that's more welcoming and inviting to them. So it's, I think of all the work that I do as how am I serving the me that I used to be? How am I serving the person that I needed and becoming that?
Yeah, that's powerful, LB. How about you, Ray?
Well, I got asked that question quite a bit, being when I got elected in 2008, I was the youngest county elected official in the country, and definitely in North Carolina. And since then, we've had two 23-year-olds get elected in North Carolina, but I was 25 when I got elected to the Board of Commissioners. And I always told people I ran because I stayed. So many of my high school friends and even my brother, they go off to school or go off to get a job and they go to the urban area and they never come back. And so, I attended our community college and I transferred to North Carolina A&T, and I even commuted back and forth from Person County to Greensboro then. And so I think just staying and realizing that if I want to continue to make this my home, then I should be involved.
Yeah, that's great. I get I have a similar story about staying in North Carolina as a journalist too. So that really resonates with me too. How about you, Misty?
So I'm actually from a rural community. I'm from Rockingham County, Reedsville, North Carolina, kind of the north central, not far from Ray. And but I'm currently in Raleigh. I did go to school here and decided to stay. But I think I've been at the Rural Center for a long time because I'm very committed to the mission and the core mission work that we do here in serving rural North Carolina. I understand, as we all do here at the center, and as everyone on this call does, I'm sure, that rural has many challenges, but there are also some really great opportunities and assets to build upon. And so seeing that, being able to work in communities, work with the wonderful leaders that are there, and that is some of the greatest assets are the people. And so I really enjoy doing that. That's what kind of motivates me. That's what gets me up every day, is knowing that that is the work that we're doing in partnership with our friends across rural.
Yeah, I love that. And speaking of friends, Brianna, tell us about what kind of inspired you and what you think your leadership style is, or what you bring as a rural leader.
So the first life experience, I guess you would say, that inspired me to do work in rural North Carolina, and specifically in my community. My first job was working in the public school system, and I taught English as a second language. And so, of course, I worked with immigrant students, refugee students from all over the world. And so I was very passionate about working with them and their unique challenges. But there was a little boy at the elementary school I was working at, definitely one of our lower income elementary schools. And every time I would come in, he would be in the principal's office or sitting in the office. And eventually I said, to our administrator, can I just bring him into my classroom? I mean, every time I come, he's not getting any instruction. He's always up here. And yes, he had some discipline issues, but he really just needed someone to take out the time to spend with him, to talk to him, to be patient and listen to his stories. And it was at that point that I realized the children right here in Robeson are facing some of the same challenges, and to the same degree that refugees are facing. Because of our high poverty rates, and because of parents having to work outside of the home at different hours because of their service related jobs. And it really inspired me to make a difference right here in Robeson County. And so over time, I've ultimately found the center here. That's what we call it, the Church and Community Center. And I was able to take everything that I learned in the public school system and actually implement it to make a real change here.
Mm-hmm. So Misty and Brianna, can y'all kind of talk about kind of top leadership? I mean, when you talk about like mentoring or even teaching leadership like the center does, is there, or are there kind of top level ideas or things that you want to impart either through, actual training or mentorship? And RAFI does the same thing. I'm kind of curious too. Or not the same, but similar, I would say.
Brianna, do you want to go first?
Sure, I can. So in terms of equipping leaders, I think that really works across the board with some of the other organizations I'm involved with. For example, Kiwanis, Young Professionals. So my role was to chair the organization. Kiwanis is also an education and child-based organization that comes in. We provide books, and read stories to children, sponsor children at Christmas. And so I stepped in as chair. And so my job, just as much as it was to serve those children, was to equip future leaders and young professionals in our community that were going to be passionate about serving children and about education, and then be empowered also in their professional and daily work and in their careers to step into those leadership positions by having kind of that pilot working in the service program. Then they could step into their careers as well and take that leadership role.
And I would say, Angie, to that question, what we focus on here at the Rural Center, we have several leadership training programs, and it's a great question to ask us today because we're wrapping up day 3 of our Rural Economic Development Institute, which is our statewide leadership program that we have had for 30 years. So we've had some great talented leaders here in the building with us for the past 3 days. And a lot of what we focus on is helping to give folks the tools, equip them to be strong community leaders. It's not so much a focus on like your individual leadership skills and styles, but more about how do you lead within your community? How do you lead with an equity lens, with inclusivity in mind, and really, and how do you, help nurture, to Brianna's point, nurture those young emerging leaders and really build that leadership pipeline, because we know, for many folks that we have spoken with and worked with across rural, most of the time folks say the the most critical issue is leadership. And there's just a need to continue to build that pipeline to equip folks with the skills that they need to lead their communities and their regions. And so we try to do that by, again, focusing a lot on equity, inclusion, resiliency. How do you build a resilient community? We're hearing that word repeatedly now. I mean, we have been with natural disasters, and now with the pandemic, of course. And also, as Ray mentioned earlier, really trying to help them help folks think with that kind of regional lens, and how do we work together across county lines, across organizations, across sectors, and pull those resources together and learn from one another. So those are some of our the focus areas that we really try to drive home with our participants and help equip them with.
Yeah. Ray, how about you?
I'd like to give a shout out to Misty and the Rural Center, as I was part of their Next Gen initiative several years back. And so they do a good job at fostering, coaching our next generation of leaders, especially in rural communities. As far as RAFI is concerned, I think we do a good job, especially around the farming community. We all know the average age of a farmer in this country is getting older. And so we do a lot of technical assistance and providing resources to those beginning farmers who are interested in getting into the ag business. And just kind of make sure they're in touch with the right resources so they have the best chance possible of being successful as they start out at such a young age.
Yeah. And LB, when you think about, you at 17 and, trying to serve that person today, I mean, what, how do you bring that mentorship to the forefront?
I think I've been really lucky in the past few years of opportunities I've had to continue learning, taking fellowships, like Ready at the Rural Center, or working with the Aspen Institute. And a lot of these initiatives where I'm able to serve as like a translator almost, of someone who can tell our community story in an authentic way to that room, and also bring those resources back to share with our community. Where it's a shame that folks ever have to code switch, but if you're someone who's been forced to learn that skill, it's a good one to have. To go into the places we're normally not allowed, and gather that information and resources and bring it back on home.
Well, that kind of brings me to a question that someone just, I think, put in the chat. What do each of you view as the greatest obstacle at the present time to achieving the goals you have for your respective areas of involvement? LB, would you like to? I don't know if that, I mean, did something come to mind immediately for you?
Yeah, I mean, working on, these intersectionalities of identities in the South, I mean, the biggest hurdle I have is the media, in general, especially when you think about like entertainment type media, because in order to create inclusive groups, they have to exist on an exclusive. So you consistently perceive rural, Southern, and especially Appalachian places as these homogenous stereotypes of this backwards, ignorant community. And to do that is because other places, our urban neighbors, they want to absolve themselves of their own, issues and sense. We don't want to talk about the actual, systemic problems within racism and inequity. We want to say, well, it's just those Southern folks. It's just those country folks that keep ruining it for the rest of us, versus us really like having to check where we really stand and how we're really showing up for those that are in need. So I think when I'm trying to show an identity that we've never seen on TV, you don't hear people who think like us and look like us and talk like us on TV. And then we wonder why those kids leave, because we've never shown them it's okay to stay here and embrace all of your identities.
So powerful. Thank you, LB. Anyone else want to jump in?
I would just piggyback off LB's comments and say sometimes the biggest hurdle is belief and getting folks in our community to believe that the stereotypes about them are not true, and they don't have the limitations that are actually brought in from the outside in regards to how we're perceived by others.
And I would just build on what LB and Brianna both said, and I think that is one of the challenges we face, and that is kind of trying to reshape that rural narrative and understanding again, and not to be dismissive, that there are challenges and some obstacles, but there are also a lot of wonderful things to highlight and to bring to the forefront. And I think it's important for us to be ambassadors for our community and share those good stories and market the wonderful assets and valuable things that our communities have to offer. So I think, again, not to dismiss realities, but to shape the narrative in a more positive way that shines a more positive light on our communities is one challenge. The other thing that I will say that I think is a challenge truly in our work, and probably many others' work right now, is I think with a number of things, the pandemic, we've all had some difficult times over the past few years. I think we are very divided in a lot of ways. And so I think one of the challenges is helping us come together and have conversations and understand that we do, even though we may differ in a lot of ways, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, but we also have a lot of commonalities, a lot of those common threads. And so how do we use those to build a more unified state and togetherness so that we can all move forward together? So
I think part also of trying to work on some of those challenges, accepting that we have challenges in the rural community. Oftentimes, I think when we talk about crime or drug abuse, opioid crisis, all those things, a lot of times us in the rural communities want to believe it doesn't happen at home, that's the urban area problems, that's the next door places problems, not ours. Homelessness, things like that we don't generally see the same way we see in urban area. Most time we're not going to see a tent city in a rural area, but that does not mean we don't have homelessness or people in need. And so I think we have to first realize that even though we live in our little piece of heaven in the rural and then in the country setting, in the small town feel, we still have some of those same problems, and we have to accept that in order before we can start trying to fix them.
Mm-hmm. Well, Ray, piggybacking on that, somebody asked, could you all talk very specifically about the services and resources and the work that you do, the people that you serve? Ray, you have an interesting mission at RAFI that I know people would want to hear about. So can you talk specifically, can y'all talk about each of your organizations a little bit more than what I did in the intro, and what you actually do to serve those communities?
Well, I think at RAFI, first people take a first glance at us, they look at, so they're an ag organization, and we are, but we are social justice and equitable. We believe in equitable food systems and things like that, sustainable ag. But that social justice piece is very important in RAFI, and making sure that agriculture services, resources, things like that are equitable across the board, especially with our BIPOC farmers, as well as our small minority farmers. And so we say, yes, we're an ag organization, but we're a social justice organization first that works in the ag community.
Mm-hmm. And how can people reach you and get involved with RAFI?
Our website is RAFI-USA.org. So just like you see it there on my screen. And we have people that work in various areas of the sustainable ag community. We do everything from supporting farmer markets to supporting churches who do food banks and so on, to our small farmers, to our beginning farmers, to our BIPOC farmers. Just connecting a lot of TA, a lot of technical assistance, and providing them with information and resources they need to be as successful as they can.
Oh, great. Yeah, LB, could you tell us about your Wilkes group?
Yeah, so in Wilkes County, I think it's hard to hear, what's the service you provide? It's I don't know, LB's just always around town talking to people. But within Forward Wilkes, the organization that started a few years ago, that was founded with Megan Barnett, who's an amazing local business owner, an advocate in the community as well. And with Forward Wilkes, we mainly serve our LGBT youth hangout. So in partnership with St. Paul's Episcopalian Church, we're able to bring in young LGBT youth from the area, and just be in fellowship with, queer adults who've lived through this, who've been on the other side, and see a success story here locally in their own towns, and just create that fellowship and safe sense of security with them. Then we also have Bourbs and Brews came out of Fort Wilkes, which is every Tuesday night at Anchor Coffee in downtown North Wilkesboro. You can jump on the Greenway with a facilitated, easy mountain bike ride that goes all the way across into Wilkesboro, down the Cub Creek trails and back. And Anchor is a really wonderful partner where they drop their beer to $3 pints on Tuesdays for all of us there. And so, I saw a question that came into where it talks about like, how can you help if you just have a modest amount of time? There's always someone that would just love like 2 hours a week. And even if that 2 hours is, sitting at the coffee shop and talking to people, you'd be amazed at like what connections and real community work can come out of things that don't really seem like work.
A good point. Good point. Brianna, tell us about Robeson in the center.
In terms of our organization, we are an emergency aid organization. So of course, our largest effort is our food pantry. Folks can come and get assistance with food every 30 days, and it's a box of food. We say it would feed a family of 4 for 5 days, but we do adjust the amount of food based on the members of the household as well. We also offer emergency medical equipment, and that would go to hospital beds, bedside commodes, wheelchairs, everything along those lines. We have prenatal vitamins for expectant mothers. We have diapers, wipes, formula. We also have adult incontinence supplies. And then we have specialty programs that are focused on community health. We bring in the nursing program from UNC every year. They conduct a health fair. We've been doing COVID vaccination clinics, flu vaccination clinics. And then we have specialty programs that go on during the holidays, like our program Brighter Christmas, that allows parents to shop for their children, and the children have no idea, where these gifts came from. Provide coats for children in need. We work with the school social workers with the public school system for that. And then, we're open to partnerships, and we always have other specialty programming as well throughout the year.
Thank you so much, Brianna. And Misty, I know that the Rural Center has a lot of diversity in its services. Can you kind of run through the major divisions of that?
Sure. So we have, as I mentioned earlier, our leadership and engagement work. We have roughly 7 programs in our leadership and engagement, and I'll just touch on a couple.
Please.
I welcome or invite any of you to visit our website if you want to take a deeper dive into that. But we have we have 2 leadership training programs: our statewide Leadership Institute, which is also known as READY, Rural Economic Development Institute. We have our, and that really focuses on, really, like I mentioned earlier, equipping leaders with a comprehensive framework for community economic development, as well as community leadership, and kind of joining those two. We have our regional leadership training, which is homegrown leaders. That's where we go into an actual region. It's a much shorter, compressed version of leadership training. It's certainly different from READY in some ways because we're focused on a specific geographical area. And right now we're working in Eastern North Carolina with homegrown leaders. We just completed 2 years ago, Western North Carolina. So we'll take that in different regions across the state. We also have a Faith in Rural Communities program where we are working with United Methodist churches across the state that is funded by the Duke Endowment. And it's really working with them and providing coaching and technical assistance and training, and working with congregations to broaden their outreach into the community, to understand community development and economic development and what their role is, and that they really do play a significant role. Our faith institutions are, key anchor institutions in a lot of our communities. So we have that program, and then we have a program partnering with the state focused on resilient communities and helping them develop and build projects that are focused on resiliency to improve their communities. We have some regional leadership and capacity building work. So that's a lot of what we do in that. We have our advocacy and research. Our advocacy work, we work with, we have a advocacy network, Rural Counts Advocacy Network, of over 2,000 advocates across the state that we engage with. We oftentimes in normal times will go out into regions and communities and work with those folks and really listen and hear from them. What are some of the challenges? What are some things that they would like to see change at the policy level to better benefit and advance rural communities? And so that's really key to us putting together and developing our policy agenda that we have. And our main focus in our policy agenda, we have healthcare, broadbands, and small business and entrepreneurship. There are many other things. There are housing and education, but those are really our top three right now that we have been placing a lot of emphasis on. And then we have our small business and lending programs. Those are handled through Thread Capital, which is a subsidiary of the Rural Center and was formed in 2018. They handle we have micro lending programs, as well as our rapid recovery loan program that was created when the pandemic hit to help businesses that were affected. We've also done it for businesses affected by natural disasters. And then we have Corner Square Community Capital, which is our first kind of endeavor working outside of North Carolina. We were working in North Carolina, but we're also focused on a large region out mostly in the Southeast, working with CDFIs, Community Development Finance Institutions. So again, lots of things going on. I should join or to visit our website or certainly reach out. I'm happy to have deeper conversations around that.
Yeah, and someone did ask in the chat if everyone could drop their contact information in the chat. If you're interested in sharing that, please do, and call on one another. That's really terrific. We love that kind of community building. Well, I would love, we've talked, there is interest in really specific issue conversations around housing, around food, around healthcare. I think that we could spend an hour plus on each of these topics. I'm wondering if y'all would choose one that's of interest to you and your community, and then talk a little bit about resiliency. There's someone from Eastern Carteret County Network. I hope you're here with us today. And they're working specifically on resiliency in rural communities. I'm really curious about what that means to y'all. Thinking about a, from to statement, we're moving, what would the to statement be in terms of resiliency? When would we be resilient? Misty, would you launch us off on that? That's a big question, but I'm kind of curious what that really means to y'all.
That is a big question. And I don't know that I have any clear or direct answer about when will we be resilient. As a matter of fact, I don't have. But what I will say is I think it is more critical now than ever. I think we are, as everyone knows, we're starting to see more frequency and intensity in our natural disasters, our hurricanes in the state, and in other places. We have the pandemic that I don't think any of us anticipated was going to be on this scale. And then of course we have for years had a number of kind of economic disasters, with manufacturing companies and bigger industries leaving our communities and trying to think creatively about how do we reinvent ourselves? How do we rebuild? And there are ways to do it. It is possible. Lots of places have done it. So I think one thing is, I think we are a state of very resilient and resourceful people. I think in order, we can sit and talk about resiliency type projects and, get specific and in the weeds with those types of things. But I think it really, again, connects back to our people as the main resource. And that's what's going to make us resilient, because it's going to be the resourcefulness of these communities and their people. It's going to be the innovative ideas. And when I say innovative, I don't mean just creative ideas. That is part of it, and thinking outside the box, but it's also this willingness to say, we're going to take a chance. We're going to take a risk here. This may not be something we've done before. Maybe it is. Maybe 30 years ago when we did it, it didn't work out so well, but it's a different time. And so let's try it again. So that willingness to do that and to learn if things don't work as planned, to be willing to say, okay, we're going to learn from this and try something new. Those to me are really key and foundational in building a resilient state, building resilient communities, organizations. so forth. So I'm not sure if that was the
No,
answer.
no, that was great. Thanks, Misty, for jumping into that giant question. Anybody else want to jump in?
I think in my experience of, the work that we do with rural queer folk, you're talking about resiliency of people who are fighting to be who they really are in a place that says they shouldn't be there, in a world that says you shouldn't be there. It's not just rural communities, because yes, rural communities are, we have homophobia and we have racism, but that's because we're in America. They're not unique to us. They're part of the system we live in. And so I think the resilience we see from these people every day who love this place, and like, you only get by with your community, with finding your people, with caring for each other. And that's always been true when you think about even in urban areas, of how the queer community moves through the world due to discrimination and displacement. And it's also always been true of farming and agrarian communities. It's a line I would love to use: farmers can do everything right and still fail, and we know that. So we don't judge failure in each other, we show up and help each other. So I think there's this common thread that's always existed with those communities, of the reason that rural and queer communities have been resistant and have continued to thrive is because they know how to lean on community and how to step up when your community needs you.
Ray, Brianna?
I think kind of taking stock of what resiliency means to you as a community. Oftentimes we look at that as working towards success, whatever success is to you. And I notice a lot of the questions involved around economic development and jobs and things like that in the rural areas. And I just think back to some time when we were doing planning and trying to maybe come up with a strategic plan for the county and things, and we would survey the citizens. And a lot of times top things were small town feel, agriculture, keeping our farms, and then it will go bring jobs, industry, and roads, more restaurants, and sometimes those things generally don't go hand in hand if you still want to keep that small town feel. Mm-hmm. So kind of taking stock as a community as far as what does success look like to you. Working toward a common goal. I used to say that it takes all of us and all of the people in the county to work together. The county, the cities, that the municipalities that's in your county, the community college, if you have one, the school system. As a commissioner, I used to say, is how can I attract jobs for? Why would I attract jobs for our community, and our community college aren't training our citizens for those type jobs? So you kind of have to be on the same page. And if our community college is going to the right on whatever they want to concentrate on, and as a commissioner, we're not attracting those jobs, then I'm training my citizens to lead. And so, we really want to work together and kind of take stock of where we want to be. And I think a lot of rural counties right now are at that crossroads to where they are struggling to bring in economic development and jobs and things. And they're starting to look maybe more like a community retirement area rather than a vibing, place with jobs. I think somewhat in Person County years ago, we were out of our workforce, something like 45% was commuting outside of the county because of our close proximity to the Raleigh-Durham area. And we see that we're a border county to Virginia. We see the Virginia cars coming right through our county, going also to Raleigh-Durham area to work. A 60-mile commute is nothing now for someone that's willing to go get a good paying job. And so you just kind of take stock of what does that mean for you, and what does success and resiliency look like? And I don't know if you're ever going to reach it, but you always can strive towards it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that means that really resonates with me growing up in Davie County. And not to reveal my age, but in the 80s, where the dairy farms started disappearing and these developments started sprouting up of people who are working in Winston-Salem or who were retiring in Davie County. So that really, I really hear what you're saying with that, Ray. And Brianna, you mentioned this when you kind of started out in terms of building levels of resiliency, right? You talked about serving and meeting basic needs in order to, go to the educational goals and else. But I don't want to talk for you, but I'd love to kind of circle back to you about resiliency and what that means for you and your organization.
Well, I would say that we're already resilient.
Yeah.
For my community, but but certainly to even endure what we have and have not given up, and we're still fighting and we're still going. And just as soon as we started to recover from the hurricane, COVID-19 came along, but we're still fighting. I mean, our county administration, our city level administration is fighting, our teachers and our education system, they're fighting, and the parents and all the members of our community have been extremely resilient from my standpoint. And so as far as the center, one thing that I haven't mentioned that's a part of our mission is workforce development. And you kind of have two sides to this coin of, we've all heard the phrase, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And that's why it's so important to reach children and reach folks that are under 18 that are experiencing adverse childhood experiences, so that they don't have to recover and so that they can be these, healthy members of society. But also because we're faith-based, it's one of our core beliefs that there is no one that's beyond redemption. And we have to give adults the resources they need and the second chance that they need sometimes. And so a criminal background does not necessarily disqualify you from working here. And we pride ourselves on being an organization that takes a chance on people that maybe another organization wouldn't take a chance on as far as employment. We also work with the Cumberland County Senior Aid Program. And so we bring seniors back to work who are interested in re-engaging and serving their community as well. And so we're really fighting on both sides. We're fighting on the prevention side for children not to have to be so resilient, to give them the tools they need to be healthy, but also adults that have experienced trauma and have a past, so to speak. We want to give them an opportunity to show that there is recovery and it is possible, but sometimes they just need that hand to help pull them up, and people that are willing to be that resource to them.
Yeah. And so can each of you, I know the hour's winding up, and again, it's gone really fast. Can each of you kind of talk to our participants a little bit about how they and other folks like them, their friends, neighbors, contacts, become more informed and engaged, and this question was in vote in rural communities. And then an ancillary question to that is, how can folks who live and work in urban communities assist rural communities in achieving your goals? So Brianna, can you lead us off on that?
Sure. So as far as how folks that are in urban communities can reach out to us, of course, with social media, there are endless possibilities for how you can befriend people in other areas of the world and other areas even within your state. So, I mean, when you go to workshops or when you go to different events, or even if they're online, pay attention to where people are from. And if you don't want to just stay with people who are kind of like-minded, and you want to challenge yourself to reach out to the folks that maybe had a different point of view, or are coming from a different background, and those are the ones that you really want to follow up with, because that helps you form those connections and bonds, so that when you're doing your work in the urban areas, you're also considering the folks in rural areas that are more likely to get left behind in the conversation.
Excellent, Brianna. LB.
Yeah, I would piggyback off that. That's kind of spot on what I was saying. In the advent of social media, if you're wondering how to be an ally to any out group, like, educate yourself, first and foremost. If you're trying to support someone who has a completely different lived experience than you, go connect, go follow, go listen, go learn. And, I think when we're trying to solve really big problems like this in the face of, the adversities that we talk about natural disasters, COVID, the uprising against systemic, issues across America, we have to have a commitment to a deep understanding of human connection. Like, we have to be committed to that if we're actually going to solve these problems. And that is that educating, learning, just asking, where you don't know. And when you're back in your urban areas, because I tend to notice this as someone who can code switch, and I hear the things people say about rural communities, check them on that. And that goes for any out group. You hear any type of joke that's not really a joke, check them on that. I was listening to a great work-life podcast that had John Amachi on it, and he had a quote that says, "Your culture is the worst behavior that you tolerate." So whatever you allow, to be said about our communities or our homes or our people, in your presence, that's your new culture. So carrying that with you to help us in our advocacy of changing the way people look at us.
Thank you, LB. Ray, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think, one thing the pandemic has done for us is made a lot of these meetings more accessible because a lot of them are being held on Zoom. So get involved, volunteer. All your counties and municipalities, they have planning boards, they have board of adjustments, they have rec boards, they have all kinds of boards that you can volunteer to serve on that I know sometimes they struggle to get people willing to do that. And so just get involved, start attending meetings. All those boards guide the growth and guide where your community is going. And as far as our urban partners, that's what we need to start referring to them or looking at them as partners. And oftentimes the rural counties or rural communities can't afford to provide some of the services that some of these nonprofits and things in the urban areas are doing. So just reaching out to them, talking about the need there in your community and seeing if they could come. Oftentimes here in Person County, we would do that for mental health. We didn't have, I'm the chair of our DSS board here, and we didn't have any youth therapists that were coming into the community. So we were able to reach out to some folks in Durham or just our neighboring county and see if they could come up, if it's just starting out twice a week, to see some of our children who needed that help, and just get involved. And again, don't look at it as us against them or them against us. We're all in this together. We're one North Carolina. That used to be our saying when I was president of North Carolina Association of County Commissioners. We're 100 counties, but we're one state.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. And Misty, would you like to wrap us up on that?
Sure. And everyone here has kind of touched on what I was going to say, but I would say, to me, the most important thing, and I'll elaborate on this a little bit, is don't make assumptions. And I think that's just true in life about people, communities, places. And I think we all, including myself, can be very guilty of it. It's easy to jump to conclusion and make assumptions based on something we hear or something we read in the news or data that we see. And so, and I think it's really dangerous. And there's always a story, a deeper story behind what you're hearing and what you're seeing. And so I would strongly encourage you to take that deeper dive. And I would also say, go out and visit, spend some of our rural places. I know many of us, we go to the coast, we go to the mountains for vacation, and that is wonderful. And they are great places. I love both parts of the state. There are lots of treasures in between. And it's really hard to have that appreciation for our rural places and for rural culture until you have spent some time there. Many places you can go for a day trip or overnight. So I would just encourage you to do that. And just as Ray said, we've got to overcome this rural urban divide. We all depend on each other. A lot of our food is grown in rural parts of the state. We like to vacation in rural parts of the state. That's where a lot of our natural resources lie. So I think just really understanding and valuing that, and working together to partner and to be, like I mentioned earlier, an ambassador for our rural parts of the state. We have a lot of rural communities and counties in this state. They are the majority of the counties and cities or towns. So, just to appreciate those and get out and enjoy what they have to offer.
I love that. That's such a great way to end our conversation together. Lots of you have presented and offered and asked really amazing, great questions. I'm sorry that we can't get to every single one of them, but I hope that they've been addressed to a certain extent throughout our conversation. And I think if I'm looking at all the questions that came in, I think they have. But certainly, please watch your inbox. We're going to send all of you, everyone who registered and who attended, we'll send you a recording of today's panel, and we'll also send out, we'll be sure to send out people's contact information that we have and any type of resources our panelists want to share with you. So please watch for that, and watch for your inbox for our daily newsletter from Carolina Public Press. I do want to say that our core mission is investigative and public interest, public service news, but we often back that up by saying we really cover what's overlooked and underreported in North Carolina. That often aligns with news deserts, and unfortunately that aligns with rural communities across North Carolina. So you can find a lot of news, in-depth news, to Misty's point. It gets beyond kind of the tweet and the headline to really delve deep into issues facing all of us as North Carolinians, issues that are in rural North Carolina. So to LB and Ray and Brianna's point, educating yourself, I hope that you'll look to us as a resource. For example, we spent a year covering rural hunger issues, and we have a lot of reporting, years worth of reporting about rural hunger, and we held 5 events across rural North Carolina and resource fairs about that specific issue. That's just one example, but you can find a lot at carolinapublicpress.org. So I hope you all will take some time to look at that. And if you're interested in supporting our kind of news and these types of conversations, please consider becoming a member at Carolina Public Press. As I said, we're a nonprofit, so we're supported by contributions from folks like you, from foundations and sponsorships. So we really appreciate that support. It helps our journalists write an in-depth story. It helps us have these great panels. So please do, if you're interested, please show your support that way. We are having also more 10 for North Carolina events coming up, and I hope that you'll join us for future ones. We're actually going to have one on Wednesday, November 3rd at noon, really taking a hard look, frankly, about why North Carolina is building so many new jails in rural communities, but not exclusively. Then we'll also look in November 17th at elections and politics issues that are coming up for 2022, probably to include redistricting as well. So those are just a couple that are coming up. And again, you can see this panel and our previous recordings at carolinapublicpress.org. So with that, I really want to thank all of you for joining us. Brianna, Misty, Ray, LB, y'all had some really amazing things to say. I love that we can get together on Zoom. I love it even more when we can all get together and have coffee or a beer up in Wilkes County with LB. So y'all please take care. Thank you so much for sharing your time with us. And on behalf of everybody at Carolina Public Press, thanks so much, and we'll see you again soon. Bye.